Well, Sir Ian Wood is perhaps the best known luminary for the offshore oil industry. The former chairman and CEO of the Wood Group, he's been involved in oil exploration in the oil industry, in particular the North Sea, for about 50 years, and he's just received the Oil Council's Lifetime Achievement Award at the Awards of Excellence. So Ian, welcome.
Thank you.
Now I know that you almost didn't go into the oil industry, that you were a psychology graduate, you thought you'd do a bit of work at the family firm, and you got involved in fish, but oil was probably furthest from your mind.
Yeah, it was 5-6 years before oil came to Aberdeen, so I really got involved in family business because my father didn't have great health. And I actually found I could do things, and I quite enjoyed it, I quite liked it. And then right out of the blue, I guess 1967, 68 was the first signs of oil, the wonderful cowboy hats and the boots and the wildcatters, the front end guys. And frankly, I was lucky and I was at the right age to try, and a lot of people, frankly, in the northeast of Scotland, what's it going to do to us? Do we really want this? You know, it was a real opportunity. I went to Houston in 1972, and frankly, my mind was blown by the size of the opportunity. So even then, I had no idea what was really to come, but I got enough to say, we're really going to have a go at this.
You've just been awarded the Oil Council's Lifetime Achievement Award. What does that mean to you?
I seem to have had a lot of awards in my life. I mean, I'm very proud. I'm very impressed when I see the previous award winners. But I'm actually getting to the stage in life when I'm able to assess what I've done, not in awards, but in actually looking back and being very realistic. I mean, I'm really keen to get my review implemented, and if I do that, I'll be very, very proud of that, along with a lot of other people put the work into it. I think that'll have a real impact on industry. So the things like that, I guess, I'm more focused on. But it's very nice to receive. I'm very honoured. But I don't think it'll alter my life at all.
Are you as optimistic about the future as you are about the past?
Well, right now it's a difficult time. We've clearly got real problems with exploration. Our exploration effort is way, way, way short of where it should be. Production efficiency isn't recovering the way that we might expect. We're not getting the level of investment. We've just come through a very big capital investment period with a number of new fields, so that'll help the next 3 or 4 years. But clearly we have to get exploration going again. There's two very important things, I think, happening just now, which I believe will help a lot. One is Treasury is doing a fiscal review. And actually, right now in the UK, that's extraordinarily important. And there are clear signs that Treasury are now focused on maximising recovery as opposed to how much money can I get next year. So I'm very hopeful that we will get some real incentives, some better understanding of what do we have to do in the medium to long term to get as much oil and gas out as we can. The second one, and you know, all congratulations to DEC for doing it, but they gave me a review to do, and that review has come up with a new regulator, a different style of regulator, and a tripartite arrangement whereby Treasury, the new regulator industry, will work much closer together and plan maximising economic recovery. But there was a huge problem. I mean, I found out early in my review that a whole lot of opportunities have been lost. Because every company was doing its own thing in its own way. There was no collaboration at all, first of all. Secondly, the size of the regulator and the capacity of the regulator had been way overtaken. I mean, we'd gone from 90 fields 20 years ago to 300 fields now, and a whole lot of small fields. The size of the regulator had halved in that period of time. So, I mean, clearly there was a real challenge. How do we transform, how do we get a regulator? And the role of a regulator, a new regulator, is going to be facilitation. It'll clearly be the license authority, but facilitation, influence, removing barriers, working with operators and the supply chain to make things happen.
Yeah, all very laudable aims, but you know, in the world of real politics and in the world of the Treasury, where what they really want to do is maximise revenues rather than actually support necessarily the industry. Is that actually achievable?
Well, I'm greatly encouraged. I mean, I have spent time with the Chancellor, spent time with the Prime Minister and other senior ministers, and I was able to explain this is how much money has been lost to the Exchequer in the last 5 to 10 years through lack of collaboration.
And that got their attention.
And it is huge amounts of money. And clearly, if we get it right from now on, I mean, I've said I think the review will produce another 3 to 4 billion barrels. I mean, that's clearly a guesstimate. But I actually think what's really encouraging is that industry are 110% behind it. I think they recognise what the opportunities are if they can work and collaborate more closely together.
So Treasury's behind it, DEC's behind it, the big oil companies are obviously behind it, but are there perhaps some often maybe hidden stakeholders who need to play a bigger part, who need to be brought into the process to unlock the full potential?
Well, you know, the most important, and they're not hidden, but they were kind of doing a function as opposed to really thinking what they were doing, were Treasury and DEC. Both should have been much more focused on maximising economic recovery. And I really think, I actually think before my review, I think Treasury was beginning to change its position with the fuel allowances, and I think DEC instigated the review because they knew there was a need for change. I think the fact they're now very much clearly focused on maximising recovery, and they're working together in this tripartite arrangement, and the fact that industry, I mean, they are the key stakeholder. But they're going to have to change their behaviour. So it's not necessarily new stakeholders.
In what way? What do they need to change?
Well, first of all, they need to be much less focused on scoring legal commercial points against each other, and actually sitting down and saying, we need to, you know, I may need you there, you may need me there, so we need to have an awful lot more kind of common thought and collaboration. And it doesn't just happen in field development, it needs to happen on exploration, it needs to happen on decommissioning, it needs to happen on utilisation of facilities. There's a whole range of ways, and I'm not being naive about it. I mean, operators will always do their own thing. They're very independent companies, but it is to their advantage, and they can see it is to their advantage on a number of occasions to be working together.
But so what you're trying to do is capitalise and maximise the economic impact of the remaining oil reserves, and perhaps we'll get on to, you know, actually how big they are in a moment. But there is the issue that you've got escalating costs, you've got a declining oil price. Yes, it is important to maximise those oil reserves, but is it becoming increasingly hard to persuade companies to make an investment case to exploit those because the oil price is going down and costs are going up all the time?
Well, I think right now that's absolutely true because we're not getting a level of exploration. I don't think anyone believes the oil price is going to go down long term. We have got a kind of adjustment just now. I think people see energy, hydrocarbon energy, as continuing to increase in price. We have a battle to get more investment into the North Sea, without any doubt at all. And that's why I believe the outcome of the fiscal review, which hopefully will say to the potential incoming companies, yes, Treasury see long-term potential in the North Sea and they're prepared to encourage people to do it. In the same way as the change in behaviour of the regulator. I mean, I went to China recently and spoke to some of the Chinese companies, and they were actually very interested at the implications of the change and what it might mean. So we absolutely do need to attract more investment. But I do think if these two things happen, there's a very important industry initiative underway on costs. Cost is a real issue, but they've got a very good group of people working on that, and I think they'll take that very seriously. These three coming together, I think, could transform the UKCS into a good investable proposition again.
But there is the problem about, is government doing enough? I mean, a lot of complaints about, well, the alternative energy industry, they're getting lots of subsidies and help, but you know, maybe the Treasury should also be making the case for giving some support in whatever form to the offshore oil and gas industry, which at the moment they're not getting.
Well,
it's not a level playing field.
To be fair, with respect, your comments are out of date. I mean, the chance, if you actually read the budget statement back in March, it's the first time ever I've read a budget statement where it sounded like the Treasury talking about oil and gas as if they had some real responsibility for it. It's very interesting to read the Treasury statement. They've got 4 or 5 parts of it they've referred to oil and gas, and they're saying quite clearly, we accept the Wood Review, and we're clearly focused on maximising recovery, and we're introducing a fiscal review. Danny Alexander, Chief Secretary Treasury, said quite recently, and this will include a number of incentives. So they're on board. Maybe I couldn't have said that 2 years ago. They're on board, and DEC, who are the sponsoring government department are clearly on board because they set up the Wood Review and they said we're accepting it as total.
But you said in the Wood report, one of the most important things was there's a sense of urgency about it.
Yes.
All right, they've come a long way from 2 years ago, but are they moving fast enough?
Well,
is it just words? Do we need more action?
No, it's not just words. What I'm going to say is government can never move fast enough as far as I'm concerned, and they've got their own ways of doing things, their own ways to consider. I believe right now we are moving probably as fast as government can move. We've got the Prime Minister and the Chancellor behind us, which means that most of the barriers generally we can overcome pretty quickly. So I know it's very frustrating. I would like to have seen, frankly, the new regulator up and running this year. I believe the new regulator will be up and running by March next year, and we're focused on that.
Now you're going from here to meet with government ministers. You're a canny operator. You've been in the business for a long time. What are you going to be doing to move them along?
I can
so it doesn't get bogged down in bureaucracy.
I can assure you an awful lot. I'm chairing the interim advisory panel, which we've just strengthened a bit. I mean, we met Ed Davey. What was it? Last week. Went through a whole range of things and removed some of the real obstacles. So we're doing everything we possibly can, and so are the industry. I mean, it just takes time for the wheels of government to move. I actually think we're probably moving them as fast as we reasonably can.
Do you think that there's enough upside in the UK energy industry? Because I mean, I know you intervened in the referendum debate, perhaps inadvertently, when there was some concern about actually, well, how much is left? What is it worth? And you seem to be poo-pooing the Alex Salmond's contention that there's an awful lot of money left there for Scotland. You seem to be suggesting there's actually less than we think.
Well, my intervention wasn't inadvertent. My intervention was caused by completely misquoting a whole lot of figures and presenting, spinning a whole lot of information about oil and gas. And frankly, I can now speak as behind us, but I mean, that was an unbelievably important event for Scotland and for the UK, and I just felt strongly, at least people must have the right facts in front of them, and I know the facts in the oil and gas industry, so I went in about, I guess, 4 weeks ago, first of all, on the basis of what I saw was completely inaccurate estimates. And yes, for a long time, people have said the remaining oil and gas is between 12 and 24 billion. We've produced 43 billion, so it's 12 to 24 billion to come. I said that in my report 3 or 4 times, and it's been pretty common figures. The Scottish Government picked it up and said it's 24 still to come, so they just went for the maximum, and they said, and people like Ian would agree with that. So there's 3 or 4 things like that which just wasn't right. Actually, what's happened is that having come out with carefully thought out 15 to 16.5 billion to come, I think virtually everyone's lined up behind that. I think the First Minister's accepted that. So chap, Professor Alec Kemp, who's the real guru in these matters, is agreeing with that. Actually, Wood Mackenzie just very recently came out with the same kind of figures. So in terms of what we know now, I think that's a very reasonable estimate of what's still to come. And absolutely, I was not running. I think this industry's got a long, long way to go. I mean, 15, 16 billion is a lot of oil and gas to take out, particularly as it's going to be towards the expensive end, with a huge amount of support required, a lot of technology required. I think it's quite an exciting opportunity. Is
fracking the way forward, do you think?
Well, do you mean onshore?
Either way.
Well,
onshore, offshore.
Well, it distinguish 2 things. I mean, clearly, onshore is shale. People just want to use this word fracking. Onshore is shale, and potentially there could be huge quantities of onshore gas, which would be massively important to the UK. And therefore, hopefully, should and will be exploited in a responsible, environmentally responsible way, taking account of the needs of local communities. I really hope, well, it has to happen, because the UK is going to need that economically. It's completely changed the American economy, completely changed it. In terms of fracking offshore, the reason I intervened 2 weeks ago was a ridiculous support by a group called N56 that were clearly backed by Yes Scotland, who said there's 21 billion barrels additional oil and gas can come from shale offshore. Now, you can't exploit shale offshore because shale needs a huge number of density wells, and it just would be uneconomical. You might get potential rocks offshore with oil in them, but actually the zone into which that oil might seep has largely been exploited. So it's unlikely. So I don't think. I mean, there's fracking taking place offshore now in a small way, and there will be some fracking offshore, but it's not going to have a huge impact. The big shale impact is going to be onshore.
So, what are you most excited about when you consider, the future for global energy?
Well, oil and gas industry, part of energy certainly, keeps changing. It's a very exciting industry. I mean, if I go back to 50 years ago, the way the UKCS has changed over that period of time. But what's happened, of course, we've now got this huge global market, significantly offshore. So we've got a lot of the technology for that in the UK. And it's very technology orientated. It's very expensive. These major offshore fields now are, what are they? 30, 40, 50 billion dollars. They're huge developments. So massive opportunities. It's a very enterprising, and it's a very exciting industry. It's a very enterprising, and it's a very risk-taking industry. So I still think there's huge potential. Clearly, we must be very, very aware of the environmental responsibility. The oil and gas industry can't stand an awful lot more of really nasty environmental incidents. So, but I mean, industry is very environmental. It's very safety conscious. So I see a great ongoing future, but it's global. I think the UK CS, I think, will be significantly exploited by 2050, which is 35 years away. But still an awful lot of opportunity in the meantime, and a lot more chance for UK companies to get into that and then use that as the international base.
Just comparing the way that the Norwegians, for example, have exploited the same continental shelf, essentially, and that they had the oil fund, and in a sense, you could look at Norway and think an awful lot more of the economic benefits from oil has actually flowed through to the wider economy, to the wider community. That may not be the case in the UK. Do you think that we should, as you're going forward and implementing the recommendations that you have suggested, that maybe the UK needs to look to Norway?
Well, part of that comment is relevant and fair, part is not. Interestingly, Norway and Holland are two really good exemplars for the regulator, for the kind of regulator I think we should have. They have got the right kind of regulator. It's a facilitating, encouraging, barrier removing, occasionally using a stick and carrot, but very much very close to the industry and helping the industry to do things. They're tough, but they help, and the regulators very, very respected, very highly regarded. So that's a very good model. I think on the economic side, it's really not a fair comparison. Norway, in respect to its size and population, has got miles more oil and gas than we have. And actually, there's no doubt in the early days of the UKCS, the whole focus was on the UK economy and the mess the UK economy was in. And it might broadly be said that the very large oil and gas revenues that came in the late 70s and the 80s and the 90s, I guess it has made a contribution to transforming the UK economy. I mean, the UK economy in the 70s, frankly, wasn't quite a basket case, but it was a real problem. 80s and 90s, and even now, what are we, the 6th largest economy in the world? So I think oil and gas has had a big contribution to that. With the wisdom of hindsight, you might say, well, we might have set up an oil fund, but I actually think the oil has been reasonably used. I mean, in terms of the Scottish government, the independent Scottish government, I'd setting up an oil fund now, we couldn't do it. We don't have enough money. I mean, the Scottish government, which was one of my criticisms, was going to need all the money, independent Scottish government, all the money it could get from oil and a lot more to actually balance the books in Scotland. So I don't think we could have set up a fund. I mean, history will dictate whether the UK has used it, and they'll be wiser than me, whether we've used the funds wisely. All I can say is I think the change in the 80s and 90s wouldn't have happened without North Sea oil.
Okay. So Ian Wood, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.